Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison. And before we get started with today's episode, I would like to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on the video. Excuse me. And don't forget to hit the notification bell and like the video and share it with your friends. If you're listening on the podcast, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice so that you can get notifications every time I release a new episode. Be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform and share it with your friends to help people find me. Today, I'd like to welcome my special guest, Tom Libelt. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks for having me, and you pronounced my name right, too.
Well,
Beautiful.
that's why I went and did the research and listened to another podcast, because I would not have pronounced it if I hadn't done my research.
Yeah, but it's still impressive. You would be surprised how many people just don't do any research beforehand.
Well, I've learned that if I want to ask questions, I do my research.
Well, you're also a writer. That's why.
Right.
This is
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my screen reader pronounced it Libelt, so I want to make sure I pronounced it right. Okay. So why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers? Tell us a little about yourself.
I'm a cross between a creative and a business person. And I've always been juggling the two worlds, and it's one of these, either be a starving artist or just be a successful businessman, but none of them are really good for me. I have to find a balance in between, right? So everything I've done from the beginning, which was, I don't think we should name all of them off, but I owned a retail store. I did music. I was a sound engineer. I created a documentary, worked multiple sales jobs, owned quite a few businesses after that, online, offline, had a coffee shop, published a ton of Kindle books, had a business where we published a ton of websites with AdSense, long time ago. Now we do mostly course marketing. I've been in the marketing space for a long time as well. Mostly juggling in between the two, right? Like trying to get my creativity out, because if I don't, and you know how that feels.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't put something out, you start kind of having a lot of, different issues going on. And then, at the same time, got to make money, right? I'm definitely not one of these people who will, be an artist and is okay with getting pats on my back, which I used to when I was younger as a DJ, but that doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, that's why I went into the freelance world, because book sales are harder. Marketing in the author world is not easy.
It's, everything is difficult until it works. And then you, and then you tell people how easy it is. But
yeah.
you're mostly telling your survivor bias, right? So that's what they're listening to.
Because everybody says, oh, so-and-so's an overnight success. No, that's not necessarily true.
Marketing a book is never as easy as writing a blog post about how easy marketing a book is.
Mm-hmm. Marketing the book is never as easy as writing the book. Let's get down to the brass tacks here.
But at the end, when everything's right, and just write a blog post about how easy everything was, that's the easiest part.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Of course. So are you a writer as well as a marketer?
Well, sort of, right? So a long time ago when I did music, I wrote quite a bit. And I'm not sure if I have a book in me, that thing that, everyone has a book in you, maybe if someone writes it for me. But I definitely have these spurts of energy where I need to put them out through writing. So what I did is I combined what I need to do is, marketing and copywriting with my actual stories and small things that I write. And I kind of, mold them together, right? So like in my newsletter, that's where I get to be expressive in that way. I can, put out as much as I want. I have an audience in front of me. I know if I want them to, I can make them buy things. So I usually don't, because I just want to put stuff out. But it's my creative outlet, and if you put out, 50 or 60 pretty decent blog articles and newsletters out, you actually wrote quite a bit that year. So I get better through that.
Wow. Okay. So I'm fascinated. There's one thing that really fascinates me in your marketing world, and had got 5,000 Kindle books published. So did you have a team of writers writing those books, or how did that come about?
Yeah. So what happened is when I was running my SEO business full time around maybe 10 years ago, um, one of our main ways to get backlinks was writing articles and blog posts and pretty much buying our way into, different websites and get the backlinks to us so that we rank really well and our clients. Um, Back then, networks were very popular. So these blog networks that someone owned. So basically someone bought, 4,000 websites, let's say. They spread them out all over the world on different domains, and we would pay them to get access on those networks, and we would have to send them a blog post with the 3 links. And if you have 100 clients, this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blog posts every single month. Well, Google caught up to that idea, and they shut down almost all the networks overnight. So that method did not work any longer, but I had a team that knew how to do keyword research, write articles, stay on topic, and basically anything you need to write a short nonfiction book.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, Kindle started coming out and getting a little popular. Back then, it was so new that you could have published the Bible like 30 other people did back then and make money off of it, or people were grabbing just free documents from all over the web and publishing them, short stories, long stories, just anything. What I thought is, look, we're writing on all of these different topics. I don't want to fire my team. And I told them, look, just do the same thing we've been doing for these websites, right? So if you have a topic like some kind of a health topic like acid reflux or something, well, write a book, a short book that pretty much consists of like 15 blog posts, put it out, and move on to the next one and start looking for those. Next thing you know, because I was still working on something else, my team goes about 3 to 4 months down the line, maybe a little longer, like, oh, we're breaking even, boss. I was like, okay, well, let's double down. And a couple years later, we got 5,000 books out there. That was pretty much the whole thing. So I created a system, and it just sort of took off. It wasn't like a long play. I wouldn't recommend it anymore. But at that time, it was just something that I thought they could do, make money, and they did much better with it than I would have imagined.
Did they have anybody editing the books, or was it just a write it and throw it up there kind of thing?
So I would not read the books myself, really. Like we had a process. We had someone doing the research. We had another person doing the first draft. Then we had an editor, maybe 1 or 2, depending on the niche.
Oh, okay.
Like it was a decent process, and the reviews were quite good for most of the books. That's like with anything.
Yeah.
It was the 80-20 rule. 20% great reviews, 80% in between.
Mediocre, yeah.
Yeah, 20% of the books sold most of everything, and then the rest were kind of like hanging in there. So the same rules apply, but the system really worked. And and I've seen other people go a little more, I guess, on the offensive, and they really thought that the Kindle business would blow up, and it did okay. And they actually went and created these like big, I would say, libraries. So like a ton of books on habits, productivity, and sort of like, different authors, which, they were just ghostwriting it. But I've seen people have a lot of success with it in those days. Now I am not so sure how that's working.
The market, it works if you know what you're doing, if you know how to market, but the market is so saturated now, it's hard to break into the business. Trust me, I know. I'm living it. I'm still pushing my poetry book out there.
Yeah, the one thing I found lately, and I kind of laugh at this, but I've told a few people and they made some really good money with it, is publish empty books.
Why would people want to do that? I mean,
so here's the thing. What I found, and this was just me looking at my clients in the productivity niche. One of the most it's sort of like a trend. Let's call it what it is. It's a trend. People are writing about their morning routines, evening routines, their goals, their systems, their diaries, blah, 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 right? So you can position these books as different types of ways for people to collect information, write diaries, their morning routine. So basically you give them an outline and ideas of what to write and kind of sell them on a goal. Like, this is the way I became blah, 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 right? I became productive by actually going in, figuring out what I'm doing every single day and changing my habits and blah, blah, blah. And instead of telling people how to, you pretty much give them a space where they can write these things out. So, this is like these empty books, right? You kind of just guide them through it, but they're like workbooks and they're pretty much empty books. And they're selling really, really well for many people. It's a strange world.
That is interesting because when you say empty books, I'm like, you can't publish just a blank book. When you talk about workbooks, you'd have to publish those in paperback, right?
Yeah, they'll be in paperback. But if you position them extremely well, they do very, very well. Like one of the goofiest ones I've seen came out maybe 3-4 years ago. And this is kind of when I started looking at it is, I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember it really well, but this book will tell you all the best things about Donald Trump, right? When you open the book, it says something like, there's nothing there. So use this as a diary instead. And people bought them.
So weird.
And people bought them as Christmas gifts and, just kind of gags, to give away and things, but it sold really well because it was targeted and positioned really well. So that's what I mean by empty books, but you just got to position them very well. You can piggyback on a lot of techniques, right? Like if someone's, selling you on this diet, well then why not sell a workbook that they can use that exactly works with this system? Like if someone's selling a book, and this is an actual book called the 12-year week, the 12-week year, right? So basically they say instead of making long plans, blah, 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 try to think of each year as 12 weeks and you'll get much more accomplished. Well, you can create a workbook for someone to use exactly for that situation, right? So there's a ton of these, ton of these if you think about them. And it's the same type of play as we did before, except it's what's popular now. And it also doesn't take a lot of work.
Right. And it gets, because they use they know how to hook people in, people are going to buy it. And then you might have some people that are upset because they think it says one thing and then you look in there and it's like, oh, this is a journal, not what I thought. But anyway, but then they still bought it. So
yeah, so that would work only if you're really lying. But with the Trump, everyone knew it was a joke. Everyone knew that's what that was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
now.
With those other books, you know what you're buying. Like, have you bought the 12, whatever book? Here's a workbook that works along with it. We'll tell you, when it pretty much says like week 1, blah, 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 fill it in.
Okay,
so
I see how it works.
Yeah.
So like, for example, Christian authors, I have a friend, she an author wrote a devotional, you could do a companion workbook with it and people would actually go for that.
Yeah. So you can pretty much say like, I think the actual Bible doesn't have a copyright. So you could even do something like a study guide where you take your own notes, right? Like So many different things you could do. I'm not, pitching this for all the authors listening. I'm just saying that there's always an opportunity. And this is the one
you just have to look for it.
Yeah. And this is the one that I'm seeing now over the last few years that I've been telling people, like, if you're still doing this business, because we're, doing something completely different now, there's always something. And often it's easier than you think. It's not hard to create these workbooks. It really isn't.
We're not saying go out and do this if this is not something that you're interested in, or this is not something that you have the expertise in. We're just saying go and look for the opportunities. That's all we're trying to tell you to do.
Yeah.
So don't, go out and, create what's on your heart, but then go out and look for opportunities to make it work.
That's it. Yes. So the one thing I found is that a lot of writers, they get frustrated because they think all these ideas passed them by. They didn't. There's always something new where you can, 1, either be creative, and 2, make your money. And often what makes you money is much simpler and dumber than what's you're actually where you get creative. That's the part, that sometimes you got to look at and be like, this is only to make money, and then I'm gonna, write something that's actually really good and put it out, and that's probably gonna struggle, and I have to market it. But this stupid little thing I put out is gonna make me money without any effort. And then that's usually, you gotta kind of look at the opportunities that way too. If you keep them within your own niche and your own interest, and that's what we're kind of saying, that's best, because you can tie things in together. And then these people who bought something that's simpler and easy to sell, you can then drive them in to what you really want to sell, like what you're really working on. But often, it's what separates the smarter creative from the struggling creative.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, something to think about. So, do you still work with writers, or are you just solely on online?
We do, but it's in a different type of frame now. So one of our most favorite business models are online courses. And if you're in the nonfiction world, there's an 80% chance you either have an online course or you've thought of one, because it's just the next thing on the value ladder for almost any business person, right? Like you have your book, which is the lowest ring of the value ladder. Then you have your online course, which is the medium. Then you might have like a mentorship or a coaching or some kind of program, which is a higher one. But that's usually the middle of the value ladder where, everyone fits in. It's great because people do know how to take online courses now. There's no fulfillment. Delivery is very easy. Once you create it, you can sell it multiple times. It's an ideal business if you can make it work, as with anything. So the writers that we work with are usually ones who want to market these online courses, right? Like they have a book, they created an online course, they maybe sold quite a few, and then it's like, well, what do I do next? It's not making as much money as I want to, or I'm having problems with it. But we still work with the same creatives. It's just maybe a little further down the road than some who only wrote a book.
So what you do is basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, the ones that have written these nonfiction books, you take the books, you create the courses, and then you help them market it. They create the courses.
We don't create the courses anymore. We used to run that part of the business, but I realized it's 90% babysitting, and I am not a very good babysitter. So they usually have to create their own course, and we take it from there.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Or after a little bit more business oriented, they come to me and say, look, I got the book, I have an idea for an online course, and then we work with them to pre-sell it, make sure it's actually something that people want before they put the next 2 months into making it.
Testing the market.
So those are the smarter ones. The ones that are just very gung-ho and come to me with a done course that's not selling. Some I have to churn away, some don't do as well as hoped, and some realize really quickly that nobody wanted this. And my first question is like, did anyone ask for it? And if the people say no, I'm like, well, then it's like flipping a coin. We have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm got to edit it and turn it into my client. But I just wrote a blog post about finding your niche market, and one of the things was testing the viability of the market. And you got to do that first.
You got to do it. And, if you have an audience already, which I don't always say, build a big audience before you sell anything, because I find that's very counterproductive too. There's got to be a balance, right? Like if you can sell something while building the audience, it's much easier and you get much better feedback. But if you have some sort of an audience, it makes it much easier for us to pre-sell it too, because you have some sort of relationship with these people, and you can get them on the phone, or you've spoken with them before, or they actually asked you to create something. It's just, it's nice to actually have a bit of that, which is difficult at first. Like getting your first 1,000 followers is a very, very hard thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Don't let anybody fool you, because I'm still working on getting followers for my website too. I know it's not easy, but it's hard work. But once you get there, it pays off.
The good news is when you hit that 1,000 mark, things will start becoming easier. It's not as big of a snowball effect as you would think. That happens a little later, but you start seeing things which you haven't before. So for example, someone will share your newsletter or something you wrote and say how amazing it is and get people in. Someone might actually pick up on it. In the beginning, you're kind of screaming into the void, always. So just realize that it takes till around 1,000 followers for things to happen a little quicker. If you're a really good writer, it could happen at around the 500 mark, because people will quickly pick up on, what you're doing and be like, this is great. But for most of us, it's about 1,000.
Yeah. So do you have any marketing advice, because I don't want to go too long, but do you have any advice for the authors out there marketing their work?
Well, with marketing books, it depends very widely also, what sort of book. A poetry book, which is very niche, and it's not as easy to find the right people unless they're really into poetry. But even then, it's like, well, who are you like? How are we gonna bait them? It's very different from like a nonfiction book where you're actually fixing something or showing some kind of an outcome. It's a very different thing. Even just a fiction book, which is like, some people just love romance books or erotica books or horror books. It's much easier to kind of, it's easier to jump into that niche and be like, well, this book is just like that book. So if you read that book, so
comp titles, yeah.
But it's the same rules apply. You still need to figure out what is the basic idea behind the book that you're selling, right? Because you got to kind of narrow it down to some kind of a marketing message. Who is it for? If it's 35 to 40-year-old women who lay by the pool and hide behind their Kindle, that's one niche. It's very different from something else. Could be, guys who are into like military stuff, 20 to 30, So you still need to figure out who these people are and then just get in front of them, with the right message. It's, you might test that message multiple times. That's what marketing is, but it's, the same rules apply.
Okay. So so where can people find you online?
The best place is smartbrandmarketing.com. That's where I put out almost all my content. All my businesses always lay underneath that business.
Okay.
But yeah, when I think of books, here's the problem too with the marketing, and it's money. If you're selling a book for $10, $20, right? You can only pay so much to get someone on your list or to get someone to buy that book, right? If you're using Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever. So it's often, better to come up with something else. And for fiction books, this is going to be very difficult. But for nonfiction or poetry, I could imagine a couple things where you throw people into a funnel where you actually sell something higher end at the back end of it, right? So you maybe show them the book initially, but then maybe have a poetry workshop or something else that helps them either read poetry better, understand poetry better, actually write poetry. Depends on the market you're going after, but something that you can actually pay to build your audience, right? So they can pay for you to build more followers. It's one of these things where you got to look at your funnel a little deeper than just the book that you're selling.
Okay. And you can also do well, that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, to kind of help not only me, but promote other authors. And what do you think about doing like workshops in the area of the fiction, and like in your genre, or writing tips or things like that, even though it may not promote the book as well?
I think it's great. I have a friend, he did a writing retreat in a castle. That was his thing. He has an online course as well, but he did a writing retreat in a castle. Another thing you could do for aspiring writers or readers who really want to get into poetry, accountability. So you could have like someone pay a monthly thing for accountability, and then you're like, how much did you read this week, or how much did you write this week, and we all kind of get together and discuss our problems, 1 hour a week, and then move on. There are so many different things. People seek connection, especially now. We're all behind our computers. We're all locked down. People want to talk to other people who are into the same thing. So if you can get a group of people around poetry, and it could be something very simple, just like accountability, or understanding poetry. Maybe you're just going to break down a different poem every week. Like, just see what connects with the audience. But there are so many different things you could do to create monthly recurring revenue with it.
That's why Patreon was created.
It's one of the easiest way to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still working on building a Patreon. I haven't done that yet, but I'm working on it. So, any closing remarks before we wrap this up?
Well, the only thing I'll tell you is, look, it always takes longer than you think, but not as longer as you imagine. Well, that's what it really is.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show, and we want to challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for watching and listening to Inspirational Journeys, and I hope you guys have a blessed day.